hands are back. Yes, and they look terrible too because we're currently canning some salsa, but we're going to do a experiment with basil jelly today. I just grew some lemon basil this year and discovered the joys of basil jelly. So we're going to do take a recipe. We've got 1 cup of water and 1 cup of vinegar, and we're using regular spicy peppery basil leaves that have just been washed, about a cup really packed. Wash them off, clean them, get rid of all the little things that are hanging on them, and drop them into the kettle. Try not to burn yourself here. My water was boiling away. Okay, and then we want to turn that down, and we want to simmer, because what we're going to do here is we're making like a tea out of basil. And I'm thinking, since I've heard a lot about jalapeno jellies and basil jalapeno jelly, we are going to introduce into this while it is simmering for about, I'd say 5 minutes, really, really low. You don't want the water to boil away. And we'll be removing all of this stuff. So I threw a couple stems and stuff in there. I didn't spend any time chopping up the leaves. It's kind of like whole leaf tea. But we want to add some beautiful garden jalapenos. And I'll tell you, as I've said before, that these are extremely hot this year. Just can't decide whether I want to leave them in the jelly or strain them out, in which case we're just going to turn that off and let it steep. This will flavor the vinegar and the water. And you might want to add a little green food coloring to kind of resemble the basil leaves that were initially in there. In the sink I've prepared some jars. I've washed them with warm soapy water, rinsed them out, and poured boiling water over them. Boiling water is not necessarily to sterilize them, because the soapy water does the trick. See, I can already smell how delightful that is. Now we're going to, in the meantime here, get our, and be very careful. Canning is so much boiling water, and you've got to be very careful that you do not knock yourself while you're removing something from the canner. Now we want to keep the canner warm to preserve our jelly, and so that's kind of why we're making jelly today. As long as you've got all that water boiling in there, you might as well add a little more. Always keep a kettle of boiling water on hand. That way, if you need to add any, introduce any to your canner, it will already be boiling. And if you need to sterilize more jars or heat up more jars, the reason you put everything in boiling water is to keep it hot. You never want to put a hot or a cold jar into a boiling water bath, because we all know from science class what happens. Alrighty then, so we've got this in not quite 5 minutes yet. I have to decide though how I'm going to put the peppers in there. They are so hot my hands are burning. We could trim them and steep them also. The one recipe I had them actually chopped up in there. We do have our food processor, so how about we process the jalapenos, and I'll be right back. Your jalapenos, and the recipe called for 12. We're only going to use 6 because every time I cut a cap off one of them, I can smell them. Give you an idea how big they are, this is my thumb. Sweet. Okay, so what we're going to do, instead of putting the seeds in, which are extremely hot, we're going to clean all that out. And if you were smart, you'd probably wear rubber gloves. I'm going to rinse that out of there. Wear rubber gloves when you do this. But you see there's seeds in there, you just want to run your finger under there and pull them out. Put them in the compost bin and rinse the rest of them out of there. If you miss a few, that's fine. So cut the tops off, cut them in half. Ugh, I can totally smell the heat. So whoever wrote that recipe apparently didn't realize that in North Dakota, when we have a summer like we did this year, you don't want to mess with those jalapenos. I'm going to use a spoon on this one. I can't seem to get my fingers under there. They've been in too much water today. Like I said, if you are not interested in feeling the burn, you definitely want to wear rubber gloves while you're messing with this. And do not, repeat, oops, do not stick your fingers near your eyes, or any place else for that matter, because it's dangerous. The capsaicin, I don't know if I pronounced that right, in the peppers is an oil that is extremely hot, and it will actually burn your skin. So we have kind of a fairly deep saucepan here, to which we're going to add the 2 cups of strained liquid from the basil. Remember, there's a cup of vinegar, a cup of water, and the basil, about a cup and a half of really packed hard basil leaves. I always guess. Okay, now we're going to add 6 jalapenos that have been finely diced. Now these are going to stay in here. We're not going to strain them out. So this isn't necessarily going to be like a clear jelly that you can see through. So it'll have the color of the jalapenos. You might not need to add any food coloring, but if you wish, you can add some food coloring. Okay, now I'm going to have to be boiling that really hard. Okay, so you'll also need, turn that on high. We're going to boil this so hard we can't stir it down. And then we're going to add the pectin. You need 3 ounces of liquid pectin, but the real secret to a good jelly, and yeah, I know sugar's not that good for you, but it's the sugar, of which we need 3 1/2 cups. So we're going to measure that. It already looks phenomenal. There's a 1/2 cup. The secret to eating things with sugar is not to eat the whole jar at once. This can also be used for glazes on ribs and things. Because of the high sugar content, you can use it like a barbecue sauce. You can pour it over cream cheese and use it as an appetizer. And we're going to use a metal spoon because, like I said, this has to be very hot. Now we're heating the water heated up again here, because it's going to have to be processed for about 5 minutes in a water bath. That doesn't mean anything except that that's what you need to do to seal the jars. Got lots of pretty jelly jars we're going to use today. Oh, I guess I have some brand new. When we're done with this, we're going to move on to the lemon basil jelly, which is an absolutely phenomenal exotic tasting jelly. Just wanted to share this with you. Do not report me to anybody for my cleaning practices, which might not look like they're kosher, but I'm trying to be very careful and very clean, but I've limited counter space here. Someday when I'm rich and famous, I'll have that wonderful test kitchen and a professional video crew. And then you'll say, I knew the hands when they were just the reddened hands of an old lady. Alright, now as long as your water's not boiling yet, we're going to cut open our pectin package and we're going to stand it up so it's ready to rock and roll. Because you got to get going on these things. Okay, so here we go. We got the pectin package open. Sweet. Do not skimp on the sugar. If you're going to skimp on the sugar in any jelly recipe, you're going to have to go with the low sugar pectin, or it won't set up. Now, my family is notoriously famous for choke cherry jelly. It's choke cherries, rhubarb, anything that grew kind of naturally was always on our table when we were growing up. We were foragers. We grew all our own vegetables. We butchered chickens. We, did all that kind of stuff. That's kind of become a lost art. So I have aunts that can make choke cherry jelly without pectin, and that makes you famous in our family, indeed. Because it takes the fruit has to have just the right amount of its own natural pectin in, and it could largely be based on the time of year you pick them, how ripe the fruit are. There's some fruits that are naturally high in pectin, like apples, and they make really easy jellies. Our apples are not quite ripe yet, but when they are, we're going to do German apple cake, maybe some apple sauce, and maybe some apple pie, which is my absolute favorite. And yes, I make my dough from lard, my pastry dough with lard in it, and there is nothing better, let me tell you. Okay, this is starting to boil. You want a boil hard, and that means that no matter how hard you stir and pull the surface of that jelly off, it is absolutely not going to stir back down. It's going to stay foamy and crazy. Okay, it's boiling really, really hard, so here comes the big part now. We add the pectin. You got to keep stirring, get that pectin in there. And you want to boil that for exactly 1 minute. The pectin knocked it down a little because it was cold. I want to make sure and get it all out of there. Boy, I'll tell you, I'm hoping that pectin doesn't go bad that quickly. Oh, no, it dissolved. Remember the first time I made basil jelly, I used pectin that was really old and it didn't actually set up. Okay, I'm watching the clock on the stove. Boil hard for 1 minute. Now you can turn it down a little bit if you don't feel comfortable, but the higher kettle you have, the better boil, the better head you can keep on it. Okay, well, we'd better get her in the jars. Fill the jars within a ½ inch of the top. Wipe the rims, put the lids and covers on, screw them tight, and get them in that water bath. Since this is going to be hot, we're going to use the half pints. Look at how pretty that is. Okay, this is how you fill the jar. You fill it up right to there. I'm going to use a paper towel because I don't have big tomato chunks. Wipe that off so it's nice and clean. Pick a warmed lid. Put it on the top. Snug that up good and tight. Ooh, I hope it works because it's really pretty. Let's set that in that boiling water.